Hello everyone, today we will continue to explain the CKS question bank content. Next, we are on question 3. Question 3 is about best practices for security in Docker files. Simply put, it's about how to make our Docker files more secure. We need to carefully identify and then modify any potentially problematic information or operations within our Docker file. First of all, it is absolutely crucial that every single person pays close attention to this specific point, both when practicing and during the actual exam. We are not allowed to attempt to build or execute our Docker file under any circumstances. Before we continue, we must emphasize this point. Do not build the log file, because if you build it here, it could lead to storage space running out. If the storage space is exhausted, what could happen? It could result in getting a 0 score. So for this question, we are only supposed to modify the Docker file and not build it. After making changes, absolutely do not run it. Do not run it under any circumstances. First, after connecting to the corresponding host, we should start by analyzing the existing Docker file provided in the question. Then we need to fix some issues within the file. There may be security problems or other issues that need to be addressed. We need to fix those, and once the fixes are done, that's it. Yes, for this question, once you finish fixing it, you're done. One thing to pay attention to here is, let's look at the last point. What we need to note here is that if we need to use a non-privileged user to execute any project, we have to use the nobody user, whose user ID is 65,535. Yes, you need to use this user, so please pay attention to that. This is the main point of our third question. And also, you cannot add or delete any configurations. You can only make modifications based on the existing content. To begin our discussion today, first let's carefully examine and analyze the various components and specific content found inside here. Actually, when you look at it closely, this particular question is quite standard and predictable. The core structure of the question itself doesn't really change much at all each time it appears in these types of assessments. So when it comes to modifying the content, it's actually pretty standard. Here, let's first open our Docker file and take a closer look. The first step is to remotely connect to our corresponding terminal. After connecting remotely, we can directly use the VM command here. To edit our Docker file, that's all we need to do. As for the path, here it is. This is a directory for CKS. Inside the CKS directory, there's a Docker folder, and within that, there's a Docker file. So we'll continue editing this file. Note that for this question, there's only this one step, just this operation. The entire task can be completed with just the VM command. There are no further steps, no additional content, because once we open it, what do we see here? First, this is an Ubuntu image, and then it runs something inside. The app command is used to install some dependencies. And after the installation, the next step is to add our source code package and then proceed with the basic steps of compiling and installing. That's essentially what this section covers. Here, the first thing we need to pay attention to is, we need to pay attention because the question mentions a requirement. In fact, the question only specifies one requirement, right? The only explicit requirement is about the user, correct? It's about our user. The ID is 6535 and our username is nobody. But right now, who is our user? It's root. Right? The current user is root. So this is actually what we need to change. This is the part we need to modify. It's about security. Basically, for this problem, what we need to change is to make it more secure. So regarding the user here, we don't need to use the administrator. We don't need to use the admin. Here, we switch to our nobody user. That means in the dog file, we just need to make a modification. We just need to change the username. So let's go to the user section and change the username to nobody. All right, after making the change, just save and exit. This is the content of the log file. For this problem, actually, besides the Docker file, there's also a manifest file mentioned in the problem, which is used to deploy our application, because the Docker file is just for the container, right? The Docker file is really just for the container. When you finally deploy the container, because in our case, it's authentication, right? We're using KS authentication. Formatis is not Docker authentication. So actually, the question here is still about, so here, if you want to deploy the container in the end, what do we actually need to use? We need to use our deployment, right? It's the process of deploying the container after my problem is deployed. So here, for this question, besides modifying the dot file, what else do we need to change? We also need to modify some information in our deployment. Of course, the content here, the file is the same as before, and the path is also the same. It's under the same directory. In the Docker directory, there's another file called deployment.iml. Here, we also need to edit it.
Let's pause for a short announcement. Friends, if you're currently preparing for this ITification exam, or if you've been studying for a while but don't feel your preparation is very efficient, this is something you shouldn't miss. Our team has been focused on its certification dumps for 16 years, doing one thing consistently, organizing the most up-to-date, most exam accurate, and easiest to use dumps to help candidates pass their exams more efficiently. Our dumps closely follow official exam updates. They are stable, highly accurate, and well aligned with real exam questions, allowing you to prepare with more confidence while spending less time. If you'd like to get the dumps for this exam and pass the certification faster, you can contact us directly via WhatsApp or YouTube private messages. We're happy to explain the latest update dates, dump stability, exam policies in different countries, as well as any current purchase discounts. Everything is clear and transparent before you decide. We also place great importance on payment security and privacy protection. The entire purchasing process is simple and secure, with no unnecessary data collection. Your personal information and privacy are fully protected. In addition, we provide 24/7 consultation and after-sales support. Whether you're just getting started or running into issues right before the exam, our support team will patiently and professionally help you analyze and solve problems. You're never preparing alone. Beyond this specific exam, our dumps cover almost all major IT certification tracks. If you plan to pursue other IT certifications in the future, feel free to reach out anytime. We'll give recommendations based on your goals.
Both of these files are the ones we're instructed to edit. The instruction is to edit them, and for this question, there's actually only this one step, which is editing on the VM. Nothing else needs to be done, right? So when we go into this file, we can see that whether it's this file or our YML file, this question is really just asking us to modify the relevant content. Just look at what's wrong in this file. So actually here, first of all, we can scroll down and look for the container section. Let's find the container section, because earlier in the question, it actually asked us to modify a security issue related to the container. So even though we've opened our deployment file, right? In fact, what we're modifying is just the container section. Here, we need to find the content in the details of our pod template, and then here is our container part. Here, as you can see, right? This is the container related information starting from here, right? Starting from here, and then regarding security related settings, let's scroll down, because the question only mentions one thing, right? Which is our user. So we look for the user, and you can see here that the running user is 65,535. This actually matches what we just discussed, because earlier in the Docker file, the user was incorrect. Even though we just changed the user, here it's 65,535. There's no problem here. This is fine, because the question also mentioned the user 65,535. Then moving further down in this question, the only thing that really needs to be changed is the security context section. In the security context, the user is fine, right? There's no issue with the user. Next, there's also the read-only root file system, which is this part here. Here, everyone needs to pay attention to one thing. Just be careful about this point. Actually, to be precise, in this question, we can't really say that you only need to modify one place. It's not quite right to say just one modification. To be accurate, there are 3 things you need to pay attention to in this question. Make sure you focus on these 3 lines. That is, starting from our run as user down to the privileges section below, these 3 items. Everyone needs to check carefully, because during the exam, they might change any part at random. First of all, the question specifically mentions the 6,535 here. So this means it's something that could be changed. If the ID here is incorrect, you must change it to 6535. In our current environment, this 6535 is fine. There's no problem with it. Then the second point is this one here. It's about permissions, right? Even when it comes to permissions, on our side here, what do we need to change the permissions to? Change them to true. And below that, it's set to false. So for these 3 lines, just make sure that the final result contains these 3 lines. Our running user should be 6,535, and the permission should be read only. For this single read-only permission, this is the point we need to pay attention to. And below, under privileges, it's set to false. So this is what we're talking about here. These are the 3 items, After you've made these changes, you can save and exit. Be sure to check all 3 lines. Make sure to check them. In the actual exam environment, they might not tell you exactly which one to change. So how should you remember this? Actually, just remember. Just remember, 6,535 true boss. That's all you need to remember. As long as you make sure that in the end, these 3 pieces of information are correct, that's fine. So that's what this question is about. You're just modifying one thing. In the dog file, you change the user's name, and then in our YML file, what you modify are the 2 or 3 items related to the user ID and permissions. So that's one part of it. That's the third question. It's a security-related modification to the Docker file. Basically, it's a security setting when creating the container. Security settings. So that's the end of our third question. The main thing is that for this question, there's actually no way to verify it. There's no way to check this one, so you really have to make sure to double check it yourself. So you have to check it yourself. And as for this verification, first of all, make sure you don't write the username wrong, right? And don't get the ID wrong, right? And also make sure the ID and permissions are correct, right? And as long as both of these files for our user are completely fine, then that's good. And there's no way to check this with other commands. You can only check it visually only by looking at it yourself. All right, that's our third question. After you're done, make sure to log out, okay? Be sure to remember that. So after that, you can move on to the next question. That's it for today's content. In the future, I'll continue to bring you explanations for other questions. If you're interested, feel free to discuss in the comments section. If you need the question bank, you can also let me know in the comments, all right? That's all for today, everyone. Bye-bye.